The story of the Ghost Army in World War II is a story of illusion, ingenuity, secrecy, and creativity that helped shape the ending of one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. It is a story that remained classified for decades, hidden not because it lacked importance, but because its success depended on invisibility. Only long after the war would the world learn that a select group of artists, sound engineers, designers, and soldiers formed a deception unit whose mission was not to destroy enemy forces, but to confuse them, mislead them, and ultimately save lives. This documentary explores the origins, operations, and impact of the Ghost Army, revealing a chapter of history where imagination became a weapon. Our story begins in 1944, but the seeds of the Ghost Army's creation were planted earlier, as the Allies studied the strategies of deception used by the British in North Africa. Deception had long been a tool of warfare, but the scale and creativity applied by the Allies during World War II were unprecedented. The success of British deception units inspired American commanders to build a unique team capable of misleading German forces in Europe through visual, sonic, and radio illusions. This new American unit would become officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, but among those who served, it earned a more mysterious name, the Ghost Army. The men chosen for the Ghost Army came from unlikely backgrounds for a military unit. Many were artists, illustrators, set designers, painters, architects, and even fashion designers. Their talents had previously been used for creativity and expression, but now they would be used for camouflage, deception, and psychological warfare. The army understood that artists could imagine illusions that soldiers might never conceive, and that creativity itself could become a weapon at a time when every advantage mattered. The core idea behind the Ghost Army was simple but daring: create a believable illusion of American military strength where there was none. Accomplishing this required innovation across several fields. Visual deception involved inflatable tanks, trucks, artillery, and aircraft that could be quickly set up and moved to simulate entire divisions. Sonic deception involved powerful speakers mounted on vehicles that broadcast carefully engineered soundscapes of troop movements, construction, and battlefield activity. Radio deception involved skilled operators mimicking the communication patterns of real divisions, complete with fake call signs and scripted chatter. Combined, these forms of deception allowed a unit of just over 1,000 men to imitate forces nearly 30 times their size. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Ghost Army was the speed and flexibility with which they operated. They could move into an area, inflate dozens of tanks and vehicles, set up fake camps, simulate radio traffic, and project the sounds of a massive military movement, all in a matter of hours. German reconnaissance aircraft might fly overhead and photograph what appeared to be a heavily fortified American presence. Enemy intelligence officers might intercept radio communications that matched the patterns of known US divisions. Troops on the ground might hear the rumbling of vehicles and construction. All of it was staged, yet all of it had to feel real. To understand the importance of the Ghost Army's work, we must consider the strategic environment of 1944. The Allies had successfully landed in Normandy in June, but progress across Europe was far from guaranteed. German defenses remained strong, and the decisions made by commanders on both sides could determine the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers. Deception played a key role in ensuring that German forces were spread thin and uncertain about Allied plans. By confusing enemy intelligence, the Ghost Army helped create opportunities for real divisions to maneuver, attack, and succeed. One of the earliest major operations undertaken by the Ghost Army occurred near the town of Brest in France. Their task was to simulate the presence of a large American force preparing to attack from a specific direction. This caused German units to reposition themselves, diverting attention and resources away from the actual Allied advance. Throughout the war, the Ghost Army's success depended on precise timing and believable illusions. Too little activity would reveal the deception. Too much might draw enemy fire dangerously close to the unit. The men of the Ghost Army walked a fine line between creativity and danger. The visual deceptions carried out by the Ghost Army were among their most iconic efforts. Inflatable tanks and vehicles became tools of war, designed not for combat, but for misdirection. These inflatables were crafted with extraordinary detail. From the air, they appeared convincing enough to sway enemy reconnaissance. On the ground, they were light enough for a few men to lift and reposition. Soldiers often joked about carrying a tank under each arm, but behind the humor was the seriousness of their mission. The illusion worked only if the Germans never got close enough to inspect the equipment. Many operations were conducted under the looming threat of discovery, and some Ghost Army soldiers recalled hearing enemy artillery fire landing not far from their positions, a reminder that even illusions could attract real danger. Sonic deception was equally inventive. Using recordings captured from real armored units, sound engineers built tracks that simulated specific activities. These included the movement of tanks, the construction of bridges, or the rumble of large troop formations. The sounds were mixed to create a three-dimensional effect when broadcast through giant speakers mounted on half-tracks. The goal was to make German soldiers believe they were hearing an American division preparing for battle. The sound teams had to consider terrain, weather, distance, and ambient noise. A poorly mixed track could undermine an entire operation. A well-executed one could convince an enemy unit that an attack was imminent, prompting them to reposition or retreat. Radio deception required another kind of expertise. Radio operators memorized the habits and communication styles of real divisions, imitating everything from cadence to call patterns. They created believable radio traffic that matched the personality of the units they were impersonating. If the real division was known for a certain operator signature or communication quirk, the Ghost Army had to replicate it. German intelligence was skilled at tracking radio behavior, and any inconsistency could expose the deception. This aspect of the mission demanded attention to detail and deep knowledge of both American and German intelligence practices. Perhaps the most challenging and ambitious operation undertaken by the Ghost Army was their role in the lead-up to the Rhine River crossing in March 1945. The Rhine represented one of the last major natural barriers protecting Germany. The Allies needed to cross it, but the Germans knew this and prepared fiercely. The Ghost Army was tasked with creating the illusion that a major crossing would occur at one location, drawing German forces away from the real crossing point. They deployed inflatable tanks, set up fake artillery, broadcast the sounds of bridge construction, and sent radio traffic mimicking the movements of a full division. The deception worked. German commanders diverted vital units, leaving the true crossing site more vulnerable to Allied success. This operation is widely considered one of the Ghost Army's greatest contributions to the war effort. The Ghost Army's mission was not without risk. Although they were a deception unit, they often operated close to the front lines. They lacked heavy weapons and were not designed for direct combat. Yet they faced enemy artillery, sniper fire, and the constant danger of detection. If captured, their unusual equipment and mission might not have been treated with understanding. Several members of the unit were killed or wounded during operations. Their bravery came not from firing weapons, but from standing in harm's way armed with illusions. What made the Ghost Army truly extraordinary was the spirit of the men who served in it. Many of them would go on to become notable artists, photographers, and designers after the war. Their wartime sketches, photographs, and journals reveal a blend of creativity and fear, humor and anxiety, determination and doubt. They recorded their experiences in paintings and notes, never knowing if the world would ever learn what they had done. For decades, They could not speak openly about their missions. The secrecy surrounding the unit meant that their contributions remained unknown even to their own families. When the Ghost Army's operations were finally declassified in the 1990s, historians and the public began to appreciate just how significant their work had been. They had carried out more than 20 major deception operations across Europe, influencing the movement of German forces and protecting American divisions from attack. Their illusions saved thousands of lives, not by defeating enemy soldiers, but by guiding enemy decisions. Today, the Ghost Army stands as a remarkable example of how creativity, art, and imagination played a part in the Allied victory. Their work challenges traditional notions of warfare, showing that battles can be won not only through strength, but through strategy, innovation, and a deep understanding of human perception. The legacy of the Ghost Army lives on in modern military deception units and in the stories of those who used their artistic talents to help end a global conflict. Even though the men of the Ghost Army often felt unnoticed or forgotten, their contributions to the war were profound. Their courage and ingenuity remind us that victory in war depends on many kinds of service, not only those who fight on the front lines, but also those who use deception, diversion, and creativity to protect others. This is the story of the Ghost Army, a story of invisible warriors, silent weapons, and the unexpected power of imagination. And as you reflect on this hidden chapter of World War II history, remember that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not through brute force, but through artistry, deception, and the courage to take risks in the shadows. As we continue exploring the story of the Ghost Army, it becomes clear that this unit was unlike anything the US military had created before. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was an experiment, a gamble built on the idea that deception could shift the direction of a war. But what truly set this unit apart was the mindset of the men inside it. They were trained to think like artists, performers, and storytellers. Every operation was, in a sense, a stage production. The audience was the German army, and the stakes were life and death. To understand how the Ghost Army operated on a personal level, we must look at the soldiers themselves. Many of them came from the art schools of New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago. They had been illustrators for magazines, designers for fashion houses, or students studying fine arts. Some had backgrounds in theater set construction. Others had worked with sound engineering or radio. These were not typical military recruits, and their presence brought a unique culture to the unit. They often sketched scenes from camp life, painted landscapes of war-torn Europe, or created caricatures of officers and fellow soldiers. Their creative output became a silent, personal record of their experiences, even when their official work remained classified. These men were handed the task of impersonating entire divisions. They had to think like actors preparing for a role. If they needed to portray a hardened armored division, they didn't just inflate tanks. They marched around the fake vehicles, left tracks in the mud, and set up supply tents in realistic patterns. They washed laundry and hung it in view of reconnaissance planes. They painted insignias on their trucks, knowing full well they might have to scrub them off hours later to impersonate a different unit. They created the illusion of 1,000 small details that, together, formed the image of a powerful military force. The best deceptions were the ones where every visual clue matched the story they were telling. At times, the work required improvisation. In one operation, the Ghost Army needed to simulate the presence of troops preparing defensive positions. Lacking the manpower to dig real fortifications, they crafted clever imitations. Shallow scoops in the earth, camouflage nets draped strategically, and artificial shadows that made the trenches seem deeper than they were. Another time, they erected a fake artillery battery in a clearing, complete with inflatable guns and piles of wooden crates that suggested ammunition stockpiles. From the air, the scene looked sharp and convincing. Up close, it would have unraveled instantly. Because of this vulnerability, the soldiers lived with constant tension. If a German patrol discovered their position before the deception was complete, the illusion would collapse. Worse, the patrol might decide to attack. Ghost Army soldiers were lightly armed and not trained for large-scale combat. They depended on secrecy and distance to protect them. And yet, they had to operate close enough to the front lines to influence enemy troop movements. Some veterans recalled hearing artillery shells landing in nearby fields, sometimes uncomfortably close. Others described nights spent listening for the sound of enemy reconnaissance planes, hoping the darkness would conceal the inflatables below. But it wasn't just the visual illusions that made the Ghost Army effective. Sonic deception was an equally powerful tool, one that relied on science, engineering, and psychological insight. The sound teams were equipped with wire recorders, a relatively new technology at the time. They captured audio from real military units, the clanking of tank treads, the grinding of engines, the shouted commands of officers. These sounds were then edited into long tracks that mimicked realistic battlefield activity. By playing them through massive speakers, they could create the illusion of movement miles away. These sound systems were so powerful that under the right conditions, they could be heard up to 15 miles away. The goal was to project activity that matched the visual deception. If inflatable tanks were being displayed in a field, the sound team might broadcast the recorded rumble of armored units rolling into position. If the Ghost Army wanted to suggest that an engineering battalion was preparing for river crossing, they might play recordings of bridge-building activity. Hammering, chains clanking, engines pulling loads. The soldiers had to think carefully about where to position their speakers, how to angle them to maximize effect, and how the terrain would reflect or absorb sound. Radio deception added yet another layer. Skilled operators crafted a believable soundscape of radio transmissions that imitated the behavior of real divisions. They studied radio logs and learned the communication habits of specific units, how often they sent messages, the tone of their exchanges, the structure of their call signs. They then reproduced these patterns in their transmissions. German intelligence units were adept at tracking radio signatures. If they knew that a particular American division transmitted frequently, then the Ghost Army had to match that rhythm exactly. If they knew that a division's radio operator had a certain style, then the Ghost Army operator had to mimic it convincingly. The combination of visual, sonic, and radio deception allowed the Ghost Army to create illusions on a scale that had rarely been seen in warfare. Their work bought time, misled German commanders, and protected Allied forces during critical operations. But their impact was perhaps most visible during the final year of the war, when the Allied push into Germany intensified. The Rhine River crossing in 1945 was one of the most decisive moments of the European theater. The Ghost Army's deception played a key role, making the Germans believe that a major crossing would occur miles away from the actual target. This misdirection helped ease the passage of the real attacking force, contributing to a breakthrough that hastened the end of the war. When the war finally ended, the men of the Ghost Army returned home with memories of secret missions they could not speak about. Many of them resumed their artistic careers. Some became influential painters, photographers, and designers. Others carried their wartime experiences quietly, never revealing the full extent of their service. Their unit was kept classified for decades, buried in archives, its story unknown to the public. Families of the soldiers often had no idea what their loved ones had done during the war. Only in the 1990s did the truth begin to emerge, leading historians to take a closer look at the unit's contributions. As historians examined the record, they found that the Ghost Army had conducted more than 20 operations across Europe. These operations influenced German troop placements, diverted forces from critical battlefields, and created opportunities for Allied advances. Their work saved countless lives. While it is difficult to measure precisely how many casualties were prevented due to their illusions, military analysts agree that their deception efforts altered the course of events in meaningful ways. In recent years, the Ghost Army has finally begun receiving formal recognition. Exhibitions, books, and documentaries have brought their story to light. Surviving members of the unit have been honored for their service. Their once secret artwork has been displayed in museums, offering glimpses into the mindsets of young men who used creativity as a shield in the midst of war. These artworks are more than sketches. They are testimonies of a unique chapter in military history. The Ghost Army reminds us that war is not only about strength, firepower, and direct confrontation. It is also about perception, strategy, and the ability to shape what the enemy believes. The men of the Ghost Army understood this deeply. They were artists in a battlefield of illusions, crafting stories with tanks that weighed nothing, radios that told lies, and sounds that came from nowhere. They manipulated the battlefield not by destroying, but by imagining. As we move deeper into the legacy of the Ghost Army, it becomes essential to understand how their techniques fit into the broader evolution of military deception. Deception in warfare is ancient, dating back to civilizations like the Greeks, Egyptians, and Chinese. Sun Tzu famously wrote that all warfare is based on deception. Yet even with this long history, the scale and sophistication achieved by the Ghost Army were unprecedented for the United States. Their work required not only creativity, but also coordination with ground commanders, intelligence units, and engineers. Every deceptive act had a purpose aligned with larger strategic goals. This coordination ensured that their illusions did not exist in isolation, but actively shaped the battlefield. One of the defining characteristics of the Ghost Army's operations was their mobility. Traditional divisions relied on thousands of soldiers and tons of equipment. The Ghost Army operated with about 1,100 men and inflatable hardware that could be packed into trucks like stage props. This mobility allowed them to move rapidly across the European theater, often being deployed with little notice. Intelligence reports would indicate where a deception was needed, and within hours the unit would pack up, drive to the location, and begin constructing an entire fictional army. Their movements had to be precise. If they arrived too early, the Germans might detect inconsistencies in the local activity. If they arrived too late, the deception would fail to influence enemy decisions. Another critical factor was secrecy. The Ghost Army's mission relied on absolute confidentiality. They were forbidden from discussing their operations with soldiers outside the unit, and even within the unit, certain teams were not always aware of the full scope of an operation. Visual deception crews might not know the details of the radio plan. Radio operators might not know how the inflatable equipment was arranged. This compartmentalization protected the mission. If one part of the operation were compromised, the rest could remain intact. After the war, this secrecy persisted, becoming a barrier that kept their story hidden for generations. Despite the secrecy, the soldiers found ways to cope with the psychological weight of their unique responsibilities. Many wrote letters home, carefully avoiding any mention of their true actions. Some kept diaries filled with coded references. Others turned to humor, creating cartoons and comics about the absurdity of carrying inflatable tanks or pretending to be a completely different division, depending on the day's assignment. Laughter became a form of resilience, a way to stay grounded while performing tasks that might have felt surreal. Their art, created during moments of downtime, reflected both fear and defiance, capturing the contradictions of serving in a unit designed to mislead rather than engage directly in combat. One story that stands out is that of a soldier who remembered inflating tanks in a field while listening to distant gunfire. He described the moment as strangely peaceful, even though danger lay just beyond the horizon. As he secured the ropes of an inflatable Sherman tank, he realized that the object before him, though harmless and weightless, could play a role in saving hundreds of lives. It was a profound moment that underscored the essence of the Ghost Army's mission. The tools of deception were humble, yet their impact could be immense. The success of the Ghost Army depended heavily on the ability to anticipate how German commanders would interpret the illusions. The unit worked closely with Allied intelligence analysts who monitored enemy patterns, communication intercepts, and reconnaissance reports. The goal was to understand not only the enemy's movements, but also their mindset. What would German intelligence expect to see? What divisions were they tracking? What rumors were circulating among their ranks? This blend of psychology and strategy helped the Ghost Army tailor their deceptions to fit enemy expectations. A deception is most effective when it feels plausible within the enemy's existing beliefs. Consider an operation where the Ghost Army needed to portray the movement of a well-known American tank division. Simply placing inflatable tanks in a field was not enough. They had to create the illusion that the division had traveled along roads, stopped in specific formations, and engaged in activities consistent with its reputation. Radio chatter had to reflect the unit's typical tone. Sonic broadcasts needed to convey the right levels of activity. Even small details mattered, such as the placement of officers' tents or the orientation of vehicle rows. German intelligence analysts were trained to spot inconsistencies, and any discrepancy could raise suspicion. Therefore, the Ghost Army had to think like detectives as much as artists. The soldiers' creativity was also tested when they had to simulate the presence of forces in terrain that did not naturally lend itself to deception. Hilly forests, muddy fields, and small villages all posed challenges. Inflatable tanks could sag or tilt on uneven ground, ruining the illusion. Sound broadcasts could bounce unpredictably off hillsides. Radio transmissions might not propagate correctly through dense forests. Each environment required adjustments. Soldiers sometimes built platforms beneath the inflatables or created makeshift acoustic barriers to shape sound. These improvisations showed how adaptable the unit had to be. The very process of inflating a fake tank or artillery piece was an art form in itself. These inflatables were made from rubberized materials and painted with precise details. Soldiers used air compressors to bring them to life, watching the limp cloth slowly expand into the recognizable shape of military machinery. Once inflated, the inflatables were anchored to the ground and positioned as if ready for battle. From a distance, especially through the lens of reconnaissance cameras, they appeared legitimate. In some cases, soldiers even smeared mud on the sides to mimic wear and tear or added fake tracks around the area to reinforce the illusion of movement. As the Ghost Army refined their methods, their operations became increasingly bold. They sometimes staged elaborate scenes featuring fake command posts, complete with signs, maps, and even actors portraying officers. Small groups of soldiers would dress as military police from a division they were impersonating, directing traffic or patrolling roads near villages. This human element added yet another layer of realism. Local civilians who observed the activity might repeat what they saw, unknowingly feeding misinformation to German intelligence networks. These staged scenes required discipline and attention to detail, reinforcing the idea that deception was a full-body performance. A particularly daring example took place when a group of Ghost Army soldiers set up a fake division headquarters in a French village. They deliberately showed themselves in town, speaking loudly about non-existent units and leaving behind props that suggested a much larger force was nearby. German spies often relied on civilian observations to gather information. By controlling what the villagers saw, the Ghost Army could indirectly influence enemy decisions. This form of theater blurred the line between war and performance, making the battlefield itself a stage. As the war neared its conclusion in 1945, the Ghost Army's tempo increased. The Allies were advancing rapidly, and German resistance was becoming more unpredictable. Success required constant adaptation, and the Ghost Army was tasked with multiple operations in quick succession. Their deceptions continued to divert enemy forces, contributing to breakthroughs that pushed Allied troops deeper into Germany. Although the men knew the war was nearing its end, they also understood that their mission remained critical. A single miscalculation could cost lives at a time when the world longed for peace. When victory in Europe was finally declared, the Ghost Army received little public acknowledgement. Their missions were still classified, and many soldiers kept their experiences private. Yet the bond formed among them endured. They had shared a strange, dangerous, and deeply creative journey that few others could understand. After returning home, some gathered for reunions, swapping stories that they still could not share with outsiders. Over time, those stories became threads that historians would one day weave into a fuller narrative of their service. Eventually, the US government began declassifying records related to the Ghost Army, and the world discovered the remarkable truth behind their operations. Veterans who had remained silent for decades finally felt free to speak. Their accounts revealed ingenuity, courage, and a belief in the power of ideas. The inflatables, soundtracks, and radio scripts became symbols of a different kind of heroism, one grounded in the ability to deceive an enemy without destroying them. The recognition they later received came not only from military historians, but from artists, engineers, and students who saw in their story an unforgettable blend of creativity and duty. Exhibitions featuring their wartime sketches and designs highlighted the dual nature of their service. They were soldiers and creators, defenders and illusionists. Their story has inspired filmmakers, writers, and educators to share their legacy with new generations. And so, the Ghost Army stands today as a testament to imagination under pressure, to courage expressed through deception rather than confrontation, and to the idea that even in the darkest moments of war, creativity can save lives. Their shadows move through history not as ghosts of destruction, but as ghosts of ingenuity. As we move further into the narrative of the Ghost Army, it becomes important to examine the broader implications of their work and what it meant for the future of military strategy. The success of their deceptions in Europe did not end with the closing days of World War II. In fact, their innovative techniques planted seeds that would influence military thinking for decades. Modern psychological operations, camouflage doctrines, and digital-era misinformation strategies all have roots in the bold experiments carried out by the Ghost Army. To appreciate this, we must look at how their unique blend of creativity and discipline shaped the doctrinal foundation for future operations. One of the most noteworthy aspects of the Ghost Army's influence was their demonstration that deception could be executed systematically, using multiple coordinated layers of illusion. Before their deployment, deception was often ad hoc or limited in scale. But the Ghost Army proved that deception could be orchestrated like a symphony, with each element playing a role that enhanced the whole. Modern military thinkers recognize the potential of such methods. The use of inflatable decoys, misleading broadcasts, false radio traffic, staged movements, and manipulated soundscapes all became parts of the larger toolkit of deception. What began as an experimental project during World War II became a conceptual model for future conflicts. In the years that followed, both the United States and other nations took note. Cold War military planning incorporated deception into potential battlefield scenarios. Training manuals were updated to include principles inspired by the Ghost Army's successes. Even as technology advanced, with satellites and electronic surveillance replacing the reconnaissance planes of the 1940s, the core ideas remained relevant. Instead of inflatable tanks, armies might deploy electronic signals that mimic troop movements. Instead of sound trucks broadcasting fake construction noises, digital tools might generate false data intended to mislead an adversary. The battlefield changed, but the underlying philosophy built by the Ghost Army continued to echo through time. However, the profound impact of the Ghost Army's work was not limited to military doctrine. It also reshaped how people understand the role of creativity in problem solving. The idea that artists and designers could directly contribute to wartime strategy challenged conventional thinking. These were individuals whose talents were rooted in imagination, yet they found themselves in situations that demanded precision, adaptability, and resilience. Their ability to think outside the conventional structure of military operations allowed them to craft deceptions that traditional soldiers might never have conceived. This shift in thinking opened the door for new interdisciplinary approaches to national security. As more details about the Ghost Army were released to the public in the late 20th century, educators began incorporating their story into lessons about creativity, teamwork, and innovation. Students studying art learned that their skills could have applications far beyond galleries or studios. Engineers studying acoustics saw how sound could become a tactical tool. Historians saw in the Ghost Army a reminder that the narrative of war is not limited to battles and political decisions, but also the small teams of individuals whose unconventional methods can change outcomes. For the surviving veterans, the renewed interest in their unit brought a complex mixture of emotions. Many felt pride at last, being able to speak openly about their service. Others found themselves reliving memories they had tucked away for decades. Some expressed regret that fellow soldiers who had passed away never received the recognition they deserved. Yet, as exhibitions, books, and documentaries highlighted their contributions, the veterans took comfort in knowing that their work had not been forgotten after all. One veteran recalled the weight he felt carrying a sketchbook in one hand and inflating a rubber tank with the other. He described how strange it was to reconcile the beauty of art with the harsh reality of war. And yet, he explained, those two worlds came together in a powerful way during his service. He believed that the Ghost Army's success came not from deception alone, but from the deep sense of purpose that each man carried. They knew their illusions could save real lives. That gave every sketch, every broadcast, every inflated tank a profound meaning. Another veteran described a moment during an operation when he watched German artillery strike the position where the Ghost Army had set up a fake division only hours before. Had the enemy known the truth, they would have aimed elsewhere, toward the real American troops who were preparing for their next advance. The veteran understood, in that moment, the incredible impact their work could have. The shells exploding in the empty field symbolized the thousands of lives that deception could protect. As we consider these personal memories, we begin to grasp the human dimension of the Ghost Army's story. These were not merely tools of strategy. They were young men facing danger, uncertainty, and moral questions about their role in a war defined by violence. They had to believe that deception could serve a righteous purpose. They had to take pride in victories that were never publicly celebrated. And they had to carry the burden of secrecy long after the world had moved on. The story of the Ghost Army also raises questions about how societies remember war. Traditional narratives often focus on battles, victories, and losses, but the Ghost Army challenges us to expand our understanding. Their work shows that war is also shaped by illusions, perceptions, and the manipulation of information. It reminds us that creativity can influence history in ways that are both subtle and profound. And it underscores the value of interdisciplinary collaboration, a lesson as relevant today as it was during World War II. In recent years, lawmakers and veterans organizations have pushed for the Ghost Army to receive formal recognition at the national level. These efforts reflect a desire to honor not only the soldiers, but the complexity of their mission. Recognizing the Ghost Army acknowledges that war requires many forms of courage: the courage to fight, the courage to heal, and the courage to deceive for a greater good. It honors the idea that innovation and imagination are powerful tools, even in times of conflict. As we draw closer to the conclusion of this documentary narrative, we reflect on the enduring significance of the Ghost Army. Their story bridges the worlds of art and warfare, blending creativity with strategic necessity. Their illusions helped shape one of the most consequential conflicts in human history. And their legacy continues to inspire those who believe that imagination, when guided by purpose, can change the world. They were soldiers without heavy weapons, artists without galleries, illusionists whose performances could never be applauded or even acknowledged until decades later. They were the quiet architects of victory, crafting shadows that carried the weight of real armies. The Ghost Army may have been born out of secrecy, but its legacy shines brightly today. As we continue tracing the deeper impact of the Ghost Army, we must return to the environment in which they operated. Europe in 1944 and 1945 was a continent scarred by war, with landscapes carved by artillery, cities reduced to rubble, and civilians trying to survive between shifting battle lines. In this environment, every movement by Allied forces could determine the fate of towns and entire regions. The Ghost Army's deceptions did more than mislead the German military. They created moments of safety, brief windows that allowed civilians to escape danger or ensured that battles were fought away from population centers. While their mission did not explicitly focus on protecting civilians, the ripple effects of their work often reached far beyond the battlefield. A recurring theme among the veterans' recollections is the sense of responsibility they carried. Many described feeling the weight of knowing that if their illusions failed, real soldiers, young men their own age, would pay the price. Unlike traditional infantry units, the Ghost Army operated with the knowledge that their work was indirectly tied to survival. If their fake tank column convinced the enemy to shift forces east instead of west, then a real American division might march into a region with less resistance. This knowledge drove them to perfect each detail, even when exhausted, even when operating in freezing weather or under threat of discovery. In one operation, a Ghost Army team spent an entire night repositioning inflatable vehicles in the pouring rain. The mud was so deep that the inflatables slid out of place unless anchored with extra ropes, and the soldiers were soaked and shivering. Despite the conditions, they worked through the night to ensure that by dawn, the field looked convincingly like the staging ground for a major armored thrust. German reconnaissance planes flew overhead hours later, taking photographs that would influence the decisions of commanders who never knew how close they came to uncovering a carefully orchestrated lie. The unit's sound engineers faced similar challenges. The equipment used for sonic deception was sensitive to moisture, temperature, and terrain. There were nights when cables froze or speakers malfunctioned. The engineers sometimes had to crawl through mud to inspect connections or shield their equipment from rain using makeshift covers. But despite these obstacles, they rarely failed to deliver the illusion on schedule. Their broadcasts, carefully timed and layered with precision, painted auditory pictures of armies on the move, construction underway, or tanks assembling for battle. To the Germans listening from afar, these sounds suggested complexity and strength. To the engineers, they represented hours of meticulous work carried out under the threat of artillery or patrols. Radio deception was perhaps the most psychologically demanding part of the Ghost Army's mission. Radio operators had to assume the identities of entire battalions, speaking in the coded rhythms of units they had never actually served in. They memorized communication quirks, learned the slang and shorthand of those divisions, and practiced imitating the cadence of operators they had never met. The fear of making a mistake was constant. A single incorrect call sign or an inconsistent pattern could reveal the deception. German intelligence tracked American radio behavior with precision, and they had analysts who did nothing but study signals for irregularities. To fool these experts, The Ghost Army operators needed not only skill, but nerves of steel. As the war wore on, the Ghost Army's missions grew increasingly daring. In some cases, they deployed within a mile or two of enemy positions. They could hear German soldiers talking at night, and sometimes German patrols passed close enough that the Americans held their breath to avoid detection. Veterans recalled moments when they felt the enemy was close enough to touch, though the Germans never knew how vulnerable the Ghost Army truly was. Had the enemy discovered them, the lightly armed unit would have stood little chance of defending itself against a concentrated attack. Yet the soldiers persisted, driven by a sense of purpose. They believed in their mission, and they believed in each other. The camaraderie that formed within the Ghost Army was unique. These were men who understood the absurdity of inflating tanks at midnight, the tension of pretending to be a division that did not exist, and the surreal feeling of seeing an entire battlefield rearranged because of their illusions. Bonds formed in shared danger and shared creativity. They supported each other emotionally, artistically, and professionally. When the stress of deception weighed heavily, many turned to drawing or painting as an outlet. Sketches from veterans show everything from humorous depictions of inflatable tanks to haunting images of wartime destruction. Their art became a quiet companion during moments of rest, a reminder of who they were before war shaped them. Some sketches portrayed scenes of civilian life in liberated towns, children watching soldiers march by, women handing out bread, men clearing debris from the streets. These moments of humanity provided the soldiers with perspective. They reminded them why their mission mattered. The Ghost Army did not win territory or storm trenches, but they influenced the flow of events that helped ultimately free those towns. Their illusions helped ensure that real divisions encountered less resistance or avoided ambushes altogether. In a war defined by destruction, the Ghost Army's work became a subtle instrument of preservation. As Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany, the Ghost Army continued to perform. German command structures were crumbling, reconnaissance became more erratic, and communication lines were breaking apart. Yet even in this chaos, the Ghost Army found opportunities to shape perceptions. Their final operations helped maintain pressure on a retreating enemy, using appearance and sound to suggest American divisions were advancing in more places than they actually were. The cumulative effect further fragmented German defenses, contributing to a faster end to the conflict. When the war in Europe finally ended, the men of the Ghost Army faced a new challenge, returning to a world that had no idea what they had done. They could not share their stories. They could not explain why they had photographs of inflatable tanks or strange sketches of fake artillery positions. Their families assumed they had served in a typical unit. Only the soldiers themselves carried the secret memories of their roles in a silent war fought with illusions instead of bullets. For many, adapting to civilian life after such an unconventional experience was difficult. Yet the creativity that defined their wartime service flourished in the years that followed. Many veterans went on to shape American art and design in the post-war era. Some became renowned painters, photographers, architects, and filmmakers. Their wartime training, where precision, innovation, and imagination met in high-stakes scenarios, became a foundation for careers that influenced culture and society. They brought the lessons of deception, storytelling, and visual clarity into their work, leaving marks on everything from commercial art to museum exhibitions. Decades passed before the Ghost Army story fully emerged. When it did, historians and the public alike were astonished. The idea that a small group of artists and engineers could manipulate an enemy army's decisions seemed almost unbelievable, like something out of fiction. But the records and testimonies made it clear their deceptions were real and their impact profound. Veterans began speaking at schools, museums, and military academies, sharing the once silent story of how creativity shaped victory. Their story also sparked discussions about the ethics of deception in warfare. Some questioned whether their tricks blurred the line between strategy and deceit. Yet most military ethicists agreed that their work, aimed at saving lives and ending the war sooner, represented one of the noblest applications of deception in human conflict. Instead of using illusions to harm, they used them to mislead in ways that reduced bloodshed. Their mission was rooted not in destruction, but in protection. As we reach the final phase of this documentary, we reflect once more on the extraordinary combination of courage, artistry, and innovation that defined the Ghost Army. Their story reminds us that even in the midst of overwhelming violence, there is room for ingenuity. Even in times of darkness, creativity can illuminate a path that protects and preserves. The Ghost Army stands as a testament to what humans can achieve when imagination is guided by purpose and shaped by necessity. They were warriors who fought with paintbrushes, radios, rubber, and sound. They were illusionists who never sought applause. They were protectors whose greatest victories were invisible, and though their tools were unconventional, their impact was undeniable. For decades, they were forgotten ghosts in the vast landscape of World War II history. But today, their story lives on, reminding us of the invisible threads that weave together moments of courage and innovation to shape the world we inherit. As the decades passed and memory faded, the surviving members of the Ghost Army aged quietly, carrying with them experiences that the world had not yet fully understood. Some of them found that time softened the edges of their wartime memories, while others could still recall with perfect clarity the tension of a dark night spent inflating tanks under the risk of enemy discovery. For them, the war had been a mixture of fear and determination, a strange hybrid of art studio and battlefield. They had lived through an experience unmatched in military history, yet for most of their lives they had no audience to share it with. It wasn't until researchers and historians began uncovering official documents in the late 20th century that the Ghost Army's story slowly emerged from obscurity. As the first articles were published and the first exhibitions opened, families were astonished to learn the truth about their fathers, uncles, or grandfathers. Many veterans described the relief of finally being able to explain years of cryptic references and obscure anecdotes. Their children finally understood why their father had sketches of tanks in fields, or why he instinctively noticed details others overlooked, or why he spoke of sound and illusion with such familiarity. The release of the Ghost Army's history became a moment of healing for families who had long sensed that there was more to the story than had been said. As public interest grew, museums curated exhibitions showcasing the artwork created during the Ghost Army's campaigns. Sketches of soldiers huddled around inflatable tanks, portraits of fellow servicemen, and scenes of European towns damaged by war became historical artifacts. These drawings captured emotions that no official military photographs could convey. They reflected the uncertainty, the surreal humor, and the weight of responsibility that defined the unit's identity. Visitors to these exhibits found themselves drawn not just to the deception tactics, but to the humanity behind them. The art revealed the minds of young men who used creativity as both a weapon and a form of personal solace in the face of war. One of the most compelling aspects of these exhibitions was the contrast between the whimsical nature of the inflatable tanks and the deadly seriousness of their purpose. Viewers often smiled at the idea of soldiers carrying rubber cannons or painting fake shadows onto props, but these light-hearted scenes masked a deeper truth. Every deception was a calculated risk, and every inflatable tank was a shield protecting real soldiers elsewhere on the battlefield. It was this duality that defined the Ghost Army: humor intertwined with danger, creativity intertwined with strategy. As surviving veterans attended these exhibitions and gave interviews, their reflections offered invaluable insights into the mindset of the unit. Many spoke about the constant pressure to innovate, to stay one step ahead of enemy intelligence, and to refine their illusions so thoroughly that even the most skeptical German analyst would be convinced. They talked about how failure was not an option, not because they feared reprimand, but because they understood the human cost of an unsuccessful deception. If the enemy saw through their illusion, American divisions could suffer devastating losses. This sense of duty fueled their commitment and sharpened their focus. The veterans also spoke candidly about the emotional burdens they carried. Some admitted that even decades later, they still replayed certain moments in their minds. A night when artillery shells landed too close, a morning when reconnaissance planes circled overhead, a moment when a fellow soldier cracked a joke to ease the tension. The memories were vivid. They were reminders of youth spent in a war that demanded extraordinary things from ordinary men. Yet, despite the challenges, most veterans regarded their service with pride. They knew that the Ghost Army had saved lives, created tactical advantages, and contributed meaningfully to the Allied victory. And they knew that their story, once hidden, was finally being told. For many, this recognition was long overdue but deeply meaningful. They had served in silence, but now their voices were heard. As the Ghost Army's story gained national attention, educators began including it in lessons about World War II. Students were captivated by the unconventional nature of the unit. They discovered that warfare was not only about strength, but also about creativity, psychology, and information control. Teachers found that the Ghost Army's narrative sparked curiosity in subjects ranging from art and engineering to history and ethics. It encouraged students to think about problem solving in new ways, to value imagination, and to understand that innovation can arise from the most unexpected circumstances. The Ghost Army also became a symbol of interdisciplinary cooperation. It showed that individuals from different backgrounds, artists, engineers, radio specialists, sound technicians, could come together to achieve something extraordinary. This message resonated with audiences far beyond military history enthusiasts. It spoke to anyone who had ever wondered whether their unique talents could make a difference in the world. Over time, public recognition of the Ghost Army continued to grow. Documentaries, books, and oral history projects helped preserve the memories of the unit for future generations. Eventually, efforts to award the Ghost Army a Congressional Gold Medal gained momentum. Members of Congress, historians, and veterans organizations argued that the unit's contributions deserved to be honored at the highest level. They emphasized that the Ghost Army had not only influenced the outcome of the war, but had done so with minimal violence, relying instead on ingenuity and illusion. When recognition finally came, it was met with gratitude from the surviving veterans and their families. For some, it was the first time that the government had formally acknowledged their sacrifices. For others, it was a moment of closure, a symbolic completion of a story that had begun in secrecy and ended in celebration. The medal represented more than an award. It was a testament to the courage and creativity of a group of men who had shaped history through deception. As we reflect on the full scope of the Ghost Army's story, we find a narrative that transcends warfare. It is a story about human potential, about the power of imagination, and about the ways in which ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges. It is a story that teaches us that innovation often emerges from necessity, that creativity can be a form of strength, and that even in the darkest moments of history, there are sparks of ingenuity that guide us forward. The Ghost Army reminds us that victory is not always won by force alone. Sometimes it is the quiet work done in the shadows, the illusions crafted in silence, that shapes the destiny of nations. Their legacy endures not only in military history, but in the broader story of human resilience and creativity. As the Ghost Army's legacy continued to unfold in the public consciousness, people began to realize that the story held an almost cinematic quality, a blend of wartime danger, artistic ingenuity, and moral complexity. Yet the true heart of the Ghost Army's story lies not in its spectacle, but in the lived experiences of the men who served within it. To understand the full emotional landscape of their mission, we must look not just at what they accomplished, but at how they felt, what they feared, and what they hoped for during those critical years. One common thread among veterans' accounts is the profound sense of isolation that came with secrecy. In most military units, soldiers find strength in sharing their experiences openly with comrades from other divisions, with family members back home, or with the general public through letters and photographs. For the Ghost Army, none of that was possible. Their mission was so sensitive that even within the army, only a small circle of officers truly understood its purpose. Many rank-and-file soldiers in nearby units had no idea that the tanks they saw in the distance were inflatable, or that the sounds they heard at night were staged performances. The Ghost Army lived behind a veil of quiet mystery, unable to explain themselves, yet always aware that the illusion depended on absolute silence. This sense of isolation created a unique camaraderie within the unit. The soldiers understood that they shared a mission unlike any other, and that they alone carried the responsibility to protect the secret that made their deceptions successful. They forged strong bonds through shared creativity, shared fear, and shared humor. Their campfires were filled with conversations about art, design, and life after the war, as much as they were filled with discussions about strategy and deception. These bonds continued long after the war ended, forming friendships that spanned decades. The veterans often explained that their greatest enemy was not always the German military, but time itself. They worked under constant deadlines, with operations often requiring them to set up illusions in a matter of hours. They had to race the sunrise, race approaching enemy reconnaissance, and sometimes race their own exhaustion. Sleep was a luxury. In some operations, soldiers worked for nearly 24 hours straight, lifting inflatables, assembling fake camps, laying down phony tire tracks, and rehearsing scripted radio chatter. The exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but they understood that even a small delay could compromise the entire deception. In addition to time, weather introduced another layer of challenge. Rain could flatten inflatable tanks or wash away carefully placed tracks. Wind could topple fake artillery. Snow could obscure visual details or muffle sound broadcasts. The soldiers had to adapt quickly, improvising ways to reinforce, redesign, or reposition their illusions. Creativity became their lifeline. They used ropes, sandbags, boards, and canvases in ways that no manual had ever described. In moments of crisis, it was not military training, but artistic intuition that saved their illusions from collapsing. Perhaps the most underappreciated aspect of the Ghost Army's work was the psychological burden of deception. Unlike soldiers who fought on the front lines, who confronted danger directly with weapons in their hands, the Ghost Army fought with trickery. They risked their lives by pretending to be a much larger force, drawing enemy attention to themselves. Some veterans spoke of the strange feeling that came with acting as bait, knowing that they were deliberately making themselves appear to be a target. They understood that if the enemy chose to attack in full force, their light weaponry would offer little protection. This knowledge created an emotional tension that stayed with them long after the war ended. There were moments when the illusions worked too well. In one operation, German artillery targeted the Ghost Army's fake positions, bombarding empty fields and inflatable tanks. The soldiers watched the destruction from a distance, knowing that their deception had drawn deadly fire away from real American units. While they were relieved to see their strategy succeed, they were also confronted with the sobering realization that had they been discovered, they would have been defenseless. The emotional impact of such moments was profound. It reinforced the knowledge that their creativity and courage had played a direct role in saving lives. The story of the Ghost Army is also a story of youth. Most of the soldiers were in their late teens or early 20s. They were young artists, designers, and engineers thrust into a war that demanded skills they had only begun to develop. Their service accelerated their growth, forcing them to make decisions under pressure, to innovate on the fly, and to trust their instincts. When they returned home, they carried with them not only the memories of war, but the confidence that comes from having succeeded in extraordinary circumstances. Many veterans later said that their experiences in the Ghost Army shaped their artistic careers, giving them a sense of discipline and creative problem-solving that lasted a lifetime. The post-war years brought different paths for the veterans, yet many of their stories share common themes. Some became successful commercial artists, lending their talents to advertising, print design, and layout. Others entered the world of fine art, exhibiting paintings and sculptures that bore subtle echoes of their wartime experiences. A few went into teaching, sharing their artistic knowledge with younger generations. And still others worked in architecture, theater production, urban planning, and filmmaking. The Ghost Army had assembled some of the brightest creative minds of their generation, and it is not surprising that they continue to shape American culture in ways both direct and indirect. For many years, the lack of public recognition might have seemed like an injustice. But the veterans often said they understood why secrecy was necessary. They knew that revealing their methods during the Cold War could compromise future deception operations. They also knew that their primary goal had been achieved. They had contributed to victory in Europe, and they had saved countless lives. Still, when the truth finally came out, the satisfaction they felt was undeniable. They had waited decades for the world to understand the significance of what they had done, and now that understanding was finally taking shape. As we near the end of this extended documentary narrative, it becomes clear that the Ghost Army's story resonates strongly in today's world. We live in a time when information, perception, and strategy remain crucial elements of global conflict. The lessons of the Ghost Army, about creativity under pressure, about collaboration across disciplines, about the subtle power of illusion, remain as relevant as ever. Their story reminds us that innovation can come from unexpected places, that courage can take many forms, and that sometimes the most effective weapon is the ability to imagine a different reality. The Ghost Army was more than a tactical experiment. It was a testament to the unbounded potential of human creativity. It proved that even in the midst of destruction, there is space for ingenuity. It demonstrated that saving lives can sometimes be achieved through deception rather than force. And it showed that a group of young artists and engineers, given an impossible task, could rise to the challenge and leave a lasting mark on history. As we continue exploring the deeper personal experiences of the Ghost Army veterans, another element of their story emerges: the remarkable adaptability that defined their service. These soldiers operated in a constantly shifting environment where expectations changed daily and where success depended on their ability to adjust quickly. One moment, they might be imitating an armored division preparing for a major offensive, and the next, they might be portraying an engineering regiment setting up pontoon bridges. Each new role required them to inhabit a different identity, crafting illusions that aligned with the ever-changing tactical situation. This adaptability was not simply a useful trait, it was essential. German intelligence officers were vigilant and methodical in studying patterns of Allied movement. If the Ghost Army repeated the same techniques too often, the enemy might detect a pattern and begin to suspect deception. Therefore, the unit took great care to vary their approaches. Sometimes they relied heavily on inflatables, sometimes on sound, sometimes on radio, and sometimes on staged human activity. In many operations, they blended all these elements so seamlessly that it became nearly impossible for observers to distinguish the performance from the movements of a real division. This constant need to reinvent themselves created an environment in which innovation thrived. Soldiers found that even small ideas, changing the angle of a fake tank's placement, altering the timing of a sound broadcast, modifying a radio operator's vocal pattern, could have significant effects. Their officers encouraged experimentation and often invited suggestions from anyone in the unit, regardless of rank. If a private came up with a clever idea for creating more realistic tire tracks or for masking the seams on an inflatable tank, his idea would be used. This open-mindedness was unusual in a rigid military system, but it was one of the reasons the Ghost Army remained so effective. The men's artistic backgrounds contributed heavily to this innovation. They were accustomed to solving problems through creative thinking, through improvisation, and through perspective. A painter might suggest adjusting lighting conditions to make an inflatable appear more three-dimensional at sunset. A set designer might recommend positioning vehicles at specific angles to play tricks on the eye. A sound engineer might advocate for mixing audio in a new way to enhance authenticity. These skills, normally used in studios or theaters, became essential components of warfare. As operations moved further into Germany, the psychological landscape of the war changed as well. Soldiers found themselves confronting the devastation left behind by retreating German forces. Many towns were reduced to shattered buildings and rubble. Civilians wandered through ruins searching for loved ones or for food. The Ghost Army soldiers often arrived in these towns before major combat units, which gave them a rare view of the war's human impact. Their journals and sketches reveal scenes of both tragedy and resilience. Families rebuilding homes from broken bricks, children offering flowers to American soldiers, elderly citizens thanking them with tears in their eyes. These encounters reminded the soldiers of the gravity of their mission. Their illusions were not abstract exercises. They directly influenced how quickly Allied forces advanced and how soon towns like these would be liberated. They understood that every successful deception delayed enemy reinforcements, diverted enemy fire, or opened a safer path for real units behind them. In this way, the soldiers felt connected to a larger purpose, one that extended far beyond the battlefield. Another aspect of the Ghost Army's service that deserves attention is the constant uncertainty under which they lived. Because their operations relied on secrecy, they rarely knew the full strategic picture. They might be told that they were imitating the 4th Armored Division, but not why. They might set up an elaborate fake encampment without knowing which real unit they were protecting. This uncertainty was emotionally difficult, yet it also reinforced their trust in the mission. They learned to accept that their work fit into a broader strategy designed by commanders far above them, and they trusted that their contributions were meaningful even without complete information. This trust was tested many times, especially in moments when operations unfolded under intense pressure. One of the most stressful operations took place when the Ghost Army had to portray 2 entire divisions simultaneously while positioned dangerously close to the enemy. The soldiers worked through the night to inflate tanks, lay out fake artillery, and set up radios. They heard enemy patrols in the nearby woods and knew that even one surprise encounter could expose the entire deception. And yet they pressed on, relying on discipline and teamwork to complete the illusion before dawn. The operation succeeded. German commanders shifted their defenses in response to the perceived threat, allowing Allied forces to advance more easily. Another lesser-known challenge faced by the Ghost Army was the difficulty of moving rapidly from one deception to the next. Their lightweight equipment made redeployment faster than that of a typical military division, but the process was still physically demanding. Soldiers often had to deflate dozens of tanks, pack up heavy compressors, dismantle sound equipment, and erase any signs of their presence before racing to a new site. These transitions required stamina and coordination. They also required emotional resilience, as the soldiers had little time to rest or reflect between missions. As the Allies closed in on victory, rumors circulated within the Ghost Army about what would happen to the unit after the war. Some soldiers speculated that their methods might be used in the Pacific Theater if the war against Japan continued. Others believed that the unit might be disbanded as soon as Germany surrendered, with its members reassigned to more traditional roles. The uncertainty added to the emotional intensity of the final months. While some soldiers longed to return home, others felt a sense of pride in the uniqueness of their mission and wondered whether they might be called upon to use their skills again. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, the soldiers experienced a complex blend of relief, exhaustion, pride, and melancholy. They knew they had played a part in a historic victory, yet they also knew that they could not speak openly about what they had done. Some returned home to start families, others returned to art schools to complete their studies, and others embarked on entirely new careers. But all of them carried memories that would remain locked away for decades, whispered only among fellow veterans who had shared the same journey. In the years following the war, as the veterans built their lives, the world continued to move forward technologically and politically. New conflicts emerged, new strategies were developed, and new generations of soldiers took up arms. Yet the fundamentals of deception, its psychology, its structure, its impact, remained rooted in principles that the Ghost Army had perfected. Military academies eventually studied their operations as examples of tactical creativity. Intelligence officers examined their work as early models of information warfare. Artists and historians praised their unique fusion of creativity and service. To this day, the Ghost Army stands as a reminder that victory is shaped not only by brute strength, but also by human imagination. Their story continues to resonate because it is both extraordinary and deeply human. It shows how ordinary young men rose to the demands of an extraordinary mission, how creativity can flourish even in the midst of destruction, and how ideas, when wielded with purpose, can be as powerful as weapons. As we continue exploring the post-war legacy of the Ghost Army, it becomes clear that their impact stretched far beyond the battlefield and long after the sounds of war had faded. The men who served in this extraordinary unit shaped not only the course of World War II, but also the trajectory of artistic and technological development in the decades that followed. Their experiences during the war became the foundation for lives defined by creativity, resourcefulness, and a deep understanding of human perception. Many veterans later described how their wartime service fundamentally changed the way they saw the world. Having learned to think in layers of illusion, they became more attuned to details that others overlooked. They noticed how shadows fell across objects, how sound traveled through different environments, how people responded to visual cues, and how even small distortions could create remarkable effects. These observations, once tools of deception, became tools of artistic and professional practice in their post-war lives. For example, some veterans found careers in advertising, where their understanding of visual persuasion helped build some of the most iconic campaigns of the mid-20th century. Others worked in film and theater, designing sets and special effects that carried traces of the creativity they had used in Europe. A few entered industrial design, using their wartime ingenuity to shape products and environments in the growing consumer culture of the post-war United States. Even those who returned to fine art carried with them a unique sensibility shaped by the surreal experience of painting landscapes while surrounded by inflatable tanks. The influence of the Ghost Army can also be traced through shifts in military thinking during the second half of the 20th century. Although the specifics of their operations remained classified for decades, the principles they had demonstrated began to surface in broader strategic discussions. Military planners came to understand that controlling information, what the enemy sees, hears, and believes, was as important as controlling territory. The idea of misleading an opponent by mimicking capacity, by exaggerating strength, or by disguising weakness became central to doctrines of psychological warfare. This shift became especially relevant during the Cold War. Though the Ghost Army itself was disbanded, the United States and its allies continued to develop deception capabilities. Radar ghosts, fake airfields, decoy missiles, and electronic warfare systems all drew inspiration from the philosophy that the Ghost Army had pioneered. Deceive early, deceive convincingly, and deceive in layers. While new technologies transformed the battlefield, the essence of deception remained rooted in creativity and insight, skills the Ghost Army had shown to be invaluable. As historians dug deeper into the Ghost Army's past, they also uncovered the personal struggles that accompanied the veterans' silence. Because they were forbidden to talk about their unit after the war, many veterans found themselves unable to share one of the most defining experiences of their lives. Some kept scrapbooks, carefully tucked away and never shown to their families. Others held onto sketches or letters containing hints of their service, and still others simply let the memories rest, carrying them quietly while living outwardly ordinary lives. For some veterans, the secrecy was a burden. They felt that their contributions went unrecognized, overshadowed by more conventional stories of combat heroism. They understood why the secrecy was necessary, but they hoped for a day when their work would be acknowledged. When declassification finally came, it felt like a release. Veterans spoke of pride, closure, and astonishment that after decades of silence, the world was finally ready to hear their story. Public reaction to the Ghost Army's revelation was extraordinary. People were fascinated by the idea that art students and designers had helped win the war through creativity rather than violence. Documentaries and news reports highlighted the unit's ingenuity, and schools across the country began teaching the Ghost Army's story as an example of unconventional problem-solving. Museums invited veterans to speak, their voices sometimes shaking with emotion as they recounted experiences they had kept hidden for most of their lives. This newfound recognition also led to broader conversations about the nature of heroism. Traditional war narratives tend to focus on battles, bravery under fire, and physical sacrifice, but the Ghost Army broadened the definition of courage. They showed that heroism can also be found in those who protect others from a distance, who use imagination as a shield, and who place themselves in harm's way not by storming enemy lines, but by convincing the enemy that they were someone else entirely. Their willingness to stand in the line of fire with nothing but illusions as defense was a form of bravery that had long gone uncelebrated. In the last years of their lives, many veterans expressed deep gratitude that the truth of their service had finally been shared. They were proud not only of what they had done, but of the message it carried, that creativity matters, that ideas matter, and that imagination can save lives. Their story became an inspiration to younger generations who saw in it a reminder that every skill, whether artistic, technical, or intellectual, has the potential to change the world. As the veterans aged, their numbers dwindled. Each passing year brought new urgency to the effort to record their memories, preserve their artwork, and honor their contributions. Historians understood that once these voices were gone, the chance to capture the full richness of their experiences would be lost forever. Families, too, felt a renewed desire to document the stories that had remained unspoken for so long. The result was a remarkable archive of oral histories, sketches, letters, and photographs that collectively paint one of the most unique portraits of wartime service ever recorded. Today, the Ghost Army's legacy stands not only in the historical record, but in the values it represents. It reminds us that innovation often emerges in times of pressure, that collaboration across disciplines can yield extraordinary results, and that sometimes the most powerful tools are those that shape perception rather than deliver force. The story resonates because it reveals the delicate interplay between creativity and survival, between deception and protection, between illusion and truth. As we move closer to completing the full narrative of the Ghost Army, it becomes increasingly important to highlight the broader cultural impact their story has had in the years since its declassification. The unit's remarkable fusion of art, technology, and strategy has captured the imagination of people from all walks of life. Artists who see in it a tribute to the power of creativity, military historians who view it as a paradigm shift in tactical thinking, and everyday citizens who are simply fascinated by the idea that a group of young men using inflatable tanks and recorded sounds could alter the course of a global conflict. One of the most profound effects of the Ghost Army's rediscovery is the renewed appreciation for unconventional contributions to national service. In most stories of war, the focus falls on soldiers who face the enemy directly, infantry charging through mud, tank crews advancing under fire, sailors navigating hostile waters. These forms of courage are undeniable, and they have shaped countless historical narratives. But the Ghost Army demonstrated that bravery also exists in subtler forms. Their risks were real, their stakes were immense, and their successes were built on ingenuity rather than firepower. This broadened definition of wartime service has resonated especially with younger generations who often feel disconnected from traditional narratives of conflict. Students studying design, engineering, or the arts find in the Ghost Army a story that relates directly to their own talents and interests. They see that creativity can intersect with national purpose, that innovation can be a form of protection, and that the skills they cultivate in classrooms or studios can hold significance far beyond what they might imagine. Teachers have reported moments when students who rarely engage with military history suddenly become deeply involved after learning about the Ghost Army, recognizing themselves in the young men who turned their artistic abilities into tools of survival. The Ghost Army's story also prompted a deeper conversation about ethics, both within the historical community and beyond. Deception plays a complicated role in human conflict. On one hand, it is a way to shield forces, redirect attacks, and reduce casualties. On the other, it is a method rooted in manipulation and illusion. The Ghost Army occupies a unique space in this ethical landscape. Their deceptions were designed not to harm, but to protect. Their illusions sought not to cause destruction, but to slow it. They represent one of the rare moments in military history when deception was used overwhelmingly in service of reducing violence rather than amplifying it. For many who study military ethics, this makes the Ghost Army a compelling case study. Its story raises questions about the responsibilities of those who wield deception, about the boundaries between strategic misdirection and morally questionable behavior, and about the necessity of creative thinking in conflicts where traditional tactics cannot minimize suffering. These discussions enrich our understanding of war and highlight the Ghost Army as an example of innovation guided by humanistic values. Culturally, the Ghost Army has inspired countless artistic works. Filmmakers have recreated operations using the veterans' own sketches and photographs as reference. Writers have explored the emotional complexities of serving in a unit founded on illusion. Musicians have composed pieces that reflect the surreal juxtaposition of creativity and danger. Even digital artists have paid tribute by crafting visualizations of inflatable tanks drifting through fog or staged encampments illuminated by moonlight. These interpretations not only honor the original unit, but demonstrate how deeply the Ghost Army resonates with modern sensibilities. Perhaps one of the most touching cultural impacts has been the way families of veterans have embraced the story. For many, the revelation of the Ghost Army's history unlocked long-closed doors of understanding. Grandchildren who once wondered why their grandfather sketched tanks instead of talking about battles now know the truth behind those drawings. Children who had speculated about strange stories or cryptic references found clarity and pride in what their parents achieved. The unveiling of this history healed old silences and strengthened family legacies, giving new meaning to memories that had once seemed incomplete. As interest in the Ghost Army grew, community organizations and historical societies began hosting commemorative events. These gatherings brought together people from diverse backgrounds: veterans, students, artists, military officers, historians, all united by curiosity and admiration. Surviving members of the unit were often special guests at these events, where they received the applause they had never sought but always deserved. In these moments, they witnessed firsthand the impact of their story on new generations. They saw young people inspired by their courage and creativity, and they understood that their legacy would endure long after they were gone. One of the most remarkable features of the Ghost Army's legacy is its demonstration of how innovation flourishes under constraint. The soldiers operated with limited resources. Their inflatables, sound trucks, and radios were not perfect tools. They malfunctioned, wore out, or behaved unpredictably in harsh weather. Yet the soldiers made them work through sheer creativity and persistence. They patched tiers, improvised rigging, invented new ways to secure equipment, and experimented with techniques never before attempted. Their ability to adapt in real time became a defining aspect of their success, and it stands today as an example of how ingenuity can turn even imperfect tools into powerful assets. This spirit of innovation has become a touchstone in discussions about creative problem solving. Business leaders, educators, and engineers have drawn parallels between the Ghost Army's approach and modern challenges. They note that constraints often lead to breakthroughs, that unconventional perspectives can spark new solutions, and that courage sometimes means trying something entirely untested. In this way, the Ghost Army serves as a model not just for military strategy, but for human creativity as a whole. As the veterans began to reach the later stages of their lives, they reflected on what their service meant to them personally. Many said that although their work remained secret for decades, they always sensed its importance. They knew that lives had been saved because German forces were misled. They knew that their creativity had eased the path of Allied troops advancing through Europe. But seeing their story finally acknowledged brought new depth to their reflections. They expressed gratitude that the world recognized not only their service, but the values behind it: imagination, teamwork, courage, and the belief that even illusions can serve truth when guided by the right purpose. Now, as we approach the final chapter of this documentary, we stand at the intersection of past and present, looking back at a story that continues to inspire. The Ghost Army was a testament to what can be accomplished when creativity meets necessity, when ideas are shaped into strategies, and when ordinary people rise to extraordinary challenges. Their legacy is not just a historical record, but a mirror reflecting the enduring power of human ingenuity. As we reach the closing chapter of this documentary, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a remarkable story, one that began in secrecy, unfolded in shadows, and only came into the light many decades after the events had passed. The Ghost Army, a unit composed of young artists, engineers, designers, and sound specialists, changed the landscape of WWII not through force, but through imagination. Their mission, hidden from public knowledge for so long, now stands as one of the clearest examples of how creativity and courage can work together to shape history. Looking back, it is almost impossible to fully measure the impact of their deceptions. Historians estimate that their illusions may have saved tens of thousands of lives, perhaps more. Every fake tank column that drew artillery away from real soldiers, every sound broadcast that convinced the enemy of a phantom division, every radio signal that disrupted German intelligence analysis. Each of these contributed to shifting the tides of war in ways that cannot be quantified. What can be said with certainty is that the Ghost Army made the battlefield safer for countless Allied units that never knew who had protected them. But the significance of the Ghost Army does not rest solely in strategic outcomes. It lies in what their story reveals about human potential. These men showed that innovation does not always come from laboratories or command centers. Sometimes it emerges in muddy fields, under the cover of darkness, from the hands of young people who simply refuse to be limited by the tools in front of them. They showed that the mind can be a weapon as powerful as any artillery, and that imagination, when used with purpose, can alter the direction of world events. The Ghost Army also reminds us of the value of diversity in problem solving. The artists who painted scenery in art school, the sound technicians who mixed audio in studios, the designers who understood perspective and proportion. These individuals brought skills to the battlefield that no traditional military unit could replicate. Their backgrounds were unconventional, but it was precisely this unconventionality that made them indispensable. They created solutions no one else would have thought to attempt. Their success stands as a testament to the importance of incorporating varied talents, viewpoints, and disciplines in any critical mission. As the number of surviving Ghost Army veterans dwindles, their story becomes ever more precious. Those who remain have spoken with humility, humor, and honesty about what they endured and achieved. They often express disbelief that their once-hidden mission has become the subject of books, films, exhibitions, and classrooms. But they also express hope. Hope that their story will inspire future generations to see creativity as a force for good. Hope that people will understand the importance of thinking differently. And hope that young individuals today will realize that their unique talents can lead them down paths they never imagined. When we consider their service, we are invited to reflect on the complexities of truth and illusion. The Ghost Army used lies to save lives. They used falsehoods to protect truth. In a world where deception often carries negative connotations, their story offers a more nuanced perspective. It shows that deception, when used responsibly and ethically, can preserve peace, protect communities, and reduce suffering. Their illusions were never about deceit for personal gain. They were about defense, about protection, about guiding the enemy away from paths of destruction. Now, as the final words of this documentary draw to a close, we stand with a deeper understanding of what the Ghost Army accomplished. They may have been invisible in their time, but their legacy is anything but invisible today. Their courage echoes across the years. Their creativity lives on in the fields they once transformed with shadows and sound. Their story continues to remind us that the world can be shaped not only by power, but by perception. Not only by force, but by imagination. This has been the extraordinary journey of the Ghost Army, a secret unit of artists who fought with ideas, a tactical masterpiece that remained hidden for generations, a testament to the belief that human creativity can rise to meet even the greatest challenges. Their work changed the course of a war, and their legacy continues to change the way we understand the past. Thank you for watching this documentary. If you want to see more stories like this, deep dives into forgotten history, untold events, and hidden chapters that shaped our world, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Your support helps keep these incredible histories alive and ensures we can bring you even more documentaries just like this.